Calico crayfish are voracious and reproduce at record speed. The non-native species now threatens local wildlife in Germany, where tens of thousands can live in a single small pond. Can this invasive species still be stopped, or will crayfish continue to spread throughout Germany? Why is the calico crayfish such a threat to biodiversity? One factor, how quickly they can reproduce, like here, in a small pond near Rheinstetten in southwestern Germany. Some 60,000 crayfish lived here in late 2017, but once they had eaten everything in the pond, they cannibalized each other. All that remains now is a murky swamp.
They eat everything, aquatic plants, insect larvae, tadpoles. That makes them omnivores, able to survive in these waters. We didn't know that before. We're dealing with a whole new type of water dweller.
Now his research team is taking up the fight. Calico crayfish can also spread over land, invading entire biotopes. Now they're making headlines in Germany. Killing machine, eating anything that gets in the way, catastrophe. That's according to news reports. As omnivores, calico crayfish enjoy larvae as well as plants, and they reproduce at an incredible speed. This crayfish matures just 3 to 4 months after hatching. That's sooner than any other type of crayfish in Europe. A female can carry up to 500 eggs. In Germany, there are no real competitors. In the contest with native crayfish species, the calico crayfish wins every time, thanks not least to its powers of reproduction. We meet Gilbert Zwick, a fisherman in the municipality of Berg just south of Karlsruhe in Rhineland-Palatinate. He hunts these crayfish, catching thousands in just one pond.
I've caught maybe 10,000 crayfish in the last years. Once I had a basket with over 100. But sometimes there's just a few, like now.
He's been catching crayfish for years and made a dent in the problem.
The crayfish ate everything in this pond. Now you can see plants growing back. That wasn't the case before. It used to be completely bare.
He's trying to manage the population here at home. He can't hope to eliminate it. 100 meters on, the fisherman encounters a German-French research team conducting a large-scale census. They want to find out how quickly the crayfish are multiplying in these waters. First, the crayfish receives an injection.
We're measuring and marking the crayfish so that we can find them after they've been released.
The crayfish have destroyed several biotopes here, and the team has caught and killed thousands. But they cannot eradicate the crayfish. Now the researchers want to learn more about their behaviour. Calico crayfish are mainly affecting the upper Rhine region. But they're also spreading north, along the river as far as North Rhine-Westphalia. Other European regions are also at risk. But the crayfish is not on the EU's list of invasive alien species that threaten native wildlife.
It has already spread along the Rhine and will soon reach the Netherlands. It urgently needs to be added to the EU list. Our study can contribute to this. We hope so, at least.
Then the crayfish would be recognised as the threat it is. Here in the southeast of Rhineland-Palatinate, the effects are impossible to overlook. Crayfish have destroyed this entire biotope. We've been following this research team for some time. Their goal is to reintroduce the European pond turtle, widely considered extinct from the Rhine region. The team has invested a lot of work, continuously releasing new turtles. But the crayfish keep interfering.
We started reintroducing this native turtle species here years ago. Now we're spending more time dealing with invasive species than we are with native turtles, and that is extremely frustrating for a conservationist. The pond was created especially for turtles years ago, but in no time at all the calico crayfish arrived and gained the upper hand. It was a beautiful body of water with lots of plants and insects. The water was crystal clear, but as soon as the crayfish moved in, it turned into a murky swamp.
The project cost over €1 million. And this is just one example of how the calico crayfish can ruin conservation projects intended for native species. If they reproduce too quickly, they even eat each other. And while the crayfish cannot eat the turtles, they can destroy their habitats.
We keep trying to create new habitats to help our biodiversity recover, but instead we've ended up with invasive, non-native species that throw the ecosystem off balance again. It feels like fighting a losing battle.
Many crayfish died here during the last drought, but the population recovered quickly. And while the crayfish are a threat to the turtle project, they're a full-blown disaster for the amphibians who live here. Their sanctuaries along the Rhine River are now in danger, says conservationist Paul Thomas. He monitors amphibians in the upper Rhine region. On his excursions, he constantly fears he will discover crayfish in one of the small biotopes he examines. The native Australian is sure it's only a matter of time until he does.
There's always got to be a first time. If they arrive, then, that's... Every time you come, okay, it could be there.
Here, the amphibians wouldn't stand a chance against the crayfish. Their eggs and tadpoles would be devoured.
The question of whether they're going to equilibrate at simply a lower level of amphibians in the landscape, or whether they're going to decline to zero eventually. And yeah, that's basically an experiment we don't want to conduct.
3 hours later, after sunset, Paul Thomas shows us a biotope the amphibians have already lost to the calico crayfish. At night, the invasive species is particularly active.
Okay, yeah, see them? See that movement?
Yeah.
Yep. I'm afraid that's what you got. Okay, so you get that.
What is a frog? Or?
No, they're the Calico crabs.
He used to be able to find hundreds of frogs here at night. Now, there's only one.
Okay. Oop, so there's your frogs there. See that eye shine?
Just a few steps further, he catches his first calico crayfish. Thousands are said to live in this small pond alone. Amphibians hardly stand a chance. He keeps finding crayfish traces along the bank.
It's the exoskeleton, or the outer carapace, yeah? So when they grow, the outside hard skeleton can't expand. They simply have to shed it.
One thing's for sure, it's too late to drive the crayfish out. They're simply too successful. And that means many other amphibian habitats are also at risk. Cornelia Buchter shows us what's at stake. Here, south of Karlsruhe, there are no crayfish yet. This is a sanctuary for frogs and various kinds of newts. A habitat created especially for amphibians. Urban expansion, among other things, had placed a severe strain on the amphibian population before the threat of calico crayfish.
Around Karlsruhe, the situation for amphibians is pretty dire. This is due mostly to land use and the resulting fragmentation of natural habitats. Then, of course, there are invasive species, especially the calico crayfish.
Zum anderen auch natürlich an den invasiven Arten, ganz besonders der Calico-Krebs.
Entire biotopes are at risk. Many of them are safe havens for endangered amphibian species. Half of Germany's native amphibian species are currently considered endangered. Dragonfly populations are also suffering. Biologist Jürgen Ott has been studying the insects for decades. In Trippstadt, north of Karlsruhe, in the Palatinate forest, he purchased a number of old fishing ponds to build a dragonfly oasis. It's a vital sanctuary for these predators, for now. The calico crayfish have yet to spread here. But closer to the river in southern Rhineland-Palatinate, in Kandel, the crayfish have arrived and are destroying important dragonfly habitats.
There used to be larger quantities of various species here, but recently we've noticed that their populations have declined significantly.
This was once a safe haven. Now the dragonfly's eggs and larvae are feeding the crayfish. This also means the local food chain is depleted.
Dragonflies are prey for a number of species. Many bird species catch newly hatched dragonflies, or even adult dragonflies.
Spiders, reptiles, and amphibians in turn face a reduced food supply. The long-term effects of the crayfish on the ecosystem are still unclear. What's certain, though, is that the calico crayfish has found ideal conditions to spread from one biotope to another. One reason for this is that most of these areas are connected.
Networking is usually a positive thing in nature. That way everything can communicate and species can spread. But in this case, it becomes problematic when it lets invasive species spread.
All the biologist can do is watch as his favourite insects are preyed upon and their habitat slowly disappears. Christoph Kuchel shows us how the crayfish invasion has altered the floodplains of the Upper Rhine. The biologist has been studying calico crayfish for over 15 years. He says that native crayfish species no longer exist here. He instantly spots several calico crayfish, but they aren't easy to catch. The invasive calico crabs run for cover. They are masters of survival.
That's the big difference between catching invasive crayfish and the native ones. Native crayfish stay put. The invasive ones run away.
The fact that only invasive crayfish live here now is mainly due to the crayfish plague. Most of the calico crayfish here transmit the disease, but do not die from it themselves. For native crayfish species, however, the infection is almost always followed by death, usually within a week or two. Caused by an invasive fungus-like pathogen, the crayfish plague paralyzes the afflicted animals who often lose their limbs. Not dangerous to humans, the disease is also transmitted by other non-native species like the signal, spiny cheek, or red swamp crayfish. Christoph Kuchel looks on helplessly as American crayfish species displace native ones.
We're seeing a displacement of crayfish species. Calico crayfish behave very differently than European crayfish. That makes them more of a pest, because they act differently. And in this particular situation, we've seen calico crayfish invade spaces where crayfish don't naturally occur, for example in temporary floodplains, which dry out and can get quite warm. Native European crayfish have never been able to tolerate such conditions, so the ecosystems in these floodplains are wholly unprepared. Crayfish are entirely new to them. Unfortunately, this means that the calico crayfish, with its high population density, can thrive there, which causes the severe ecological fallout we're observing.
It's too soon to tell how much the crayfish plague will change the Upper Rhine floodplains. Can the crayfish invasion still be stopped? And how did it come to this? Calico crayfish originate in North America. There they face stiff competition. They found their niche there by following what's known as the R strategy, a reproductive strategy that involves laying as many eggs as possible to ensure that at least some offspring survive. In Germany, the ecological niche for crayfish is larger because there are no significant competitors, and few predators, such as birds and otters, have developed a taste for them. In Germany, calico crayfish mostly inhabit ponds without predatory fish, and therefore have virtually no enemies. But how did these North American crayfish end up in Germany in the first place? It all probably started somewhere around this artificial lake near Karlsruhe International Airport. Just a few animals, perhaps even a single female, changed everything.
If a female can carry 250 to 500 eggs, she can quickly establish a population. In other words, a single event is enough to create a new population.
At the neighbouring airport, a former airbase, Canadian soldiers were stationed until 1993. Back home, they'd used crayfish as fishing bait. As we research, we quickly come across several videos showing how to use crayfish as bait.
Just like that, and I faced the point towards his tail. Just like that. The reason I do that is because they'll hit these crawfish from different angles, but they'll turn the crawfish tail first and swallowing tail first. So that's the reason I turn my hook that way. You can get a better hook set. All right, let's see what we can do right here.
Some might have managed to free themselves from the hook. There's also a simpler explanation.
Basically, you take a small bucket, fill it with live crayfish to use as bait, and go fish. But say you're not having any luck. You just can't catch anything. So you think, oh, it's late. I should go home and feed the baby. But you still have this bucket full of crayfish. So the question becomes, do I take this home with me? Or do I just go to the water and do this? In North America, this is called bait bucket introduction.
This scenario is more likely. Either way, it's certain that humans introduced the calico crayfish to Germany and thus to an ideal habitat. As a result, calico crayfish now inhabit 80% of the floodplains along the Upper Rhine. In some areas, up to 10 crayfish can be found on a single square metre. From here, they've spread northward along the Rhine River. It's not clear just how far they've spread, partly due to limited research. But media reports have been raising awareness. In 2018, private individuals chanced upon crayfish in Wiesbaden. And the same year, more were found in Düsseldorf, in the heart of the city, in tributaries and streams of the Rhine. The first calico crayfish have even been spotted in the Black Forest and near Stuttgart. These too were likely introduced by humans, as they could not have migrated so far on their own. What can we do about this crayfish invasion? We head back to see Gilbert Zwick. The fisherman also considers himself a hunter of sorts.
I don't catch fish just for the sake of it. So many fishers like to catch fish and then release them once they've weighed and photographed them. I'm not like that.
Gilbert Zwick has developed a taste for calico crayfish. They're now a regular staple in his diet.
I don't catch animals just to kill them or throw them away. That's unacceptable. The least we can do is make use of what we catch. It's not a main course. It's more of a little treat.
Only the tail can be eaten. But if calico crayfish are edible, can't we just eat them all? Time to head to Berlin. Here, invasive red swamp crayfish are swarming green spaces. Now there's a company that catches and sells them wholesale to restaurants. But the crayfish population has remained well established.
For decades across Europe, we've seen plenty of examples where precisely this was attempted. They'd sound the alarm to hunt down all the crayfish, But it's never worked. In fact, it's always been counterproductive, causing populations to grow larger and spread further. The crayfish start being introduced because there is an interest in using them. No one wants to exterminate a resource they're using.
If we cannot eat them all, what about poisoning them? Can crayfish be targeted with biocides? In theory, yes. Sweden, Norway and the UK offer models. Although there are no calico crayfish here yet, biocides are being tested on signal crayfish, another invasive species. One commonly used biocide is pyrethrum, an insecticide whose active ingredient comes from chrysanthemums. In small test sites, researchers were able to completely eradicate the crayfish with just 1, 2 or 3 targeted treatments. But it's not just the crayfish that die. At these doses, some fish, eggs and larvae may not survive either. Researchers see it as a chemical emergency brake that works as long as every single crayfish is killed. When this treatment is successful, evidence shows that other creatures begin to recover quickly, even within the first year. So, biocides can help fight invasive species. Could this work in Germany?
In evolutionary biology, you've got to strike first, strike hard, as they say. So, the earlier you discover a pest, the harder you should, quote, hit it, so to speak. In the case of crayfish, this would certainly include biocides.
Along the Rhine, it's too late for biocides. The crayfish are here to stay. Would Germany ever actually deploy biocides for pest control? It's unlikely. And by the time a decision is made, it might already be too late. But there is some good news. At least on a local level, it is possible to keep crayfish out and protect amphibian habitats. We catch up with Andreas Martens and his team in Rheinstetten, south of Karlsruhe. They didn't want to stand by idly as entire amphibian biotopes were laid to waste. In 2018, they fished tens of thousands of calico crayfish out of this pond.
It's very time-consuming, but we're doing it anyway to protect particularly endangered species. We want to ensure that the tree frog continues to exist here, and if we don't try now, at least in certain areas, we will lose tree frogs in this whole region.
Simply catching the crayfish isn't enough. The research team has piled up gravel to prevent the crayfish from burrowing.
It stops the crayfish from digging and their tunnels collapse. That means there's no place left to hide. But the main point remains. We must stop them from invading again.
That is why they've encircled the pond with a protective ring of tree trunks, a barrier to keep the omnivores out. Although the calico crayfish can migrate for miles, the 30-centimetre high trunks pose an insurmountable obstacle for them. That is, if mice don't burrow underneath. To eliminate any risk, holes are plugged immediately. Even a single gap could jeopardise the whole project.
If a single female reaches water, then soon you'll have 350 crayfish.
A single animal can repopulate an entire body of water with thousands of offspring in just a year. For a long time, the researchers were unsure whether their protective measures would be effective. But today, their efforts have clearly paid off. 3 years ago, the pond was completely overrun by crayfish. Today, the water is clear again and teeming with diversity. Tree frogs have returned. The pond is slowly recovering, and the research team has even discovered the larvae of emperor dragonflies. Could this be the recipe for protecting more biotopes in the future? The research team thinks so.
Think about replacement measures for roads, railways. A lot of planning goes into it. And it is important that our research is taken into account. So it does have a broad
In the future, when new conservation habitats are constructed, they can be shielded from calico crayfish right from the start. The pilot project was completed in 2020, and the Karlsruhe research team has since collaborated with the German environmental organisation NABU to convert further biotopes. What can we learn from the case of the calico crayfish? Even if we catch them, poison them or eat them, it won't be enough to exterminate them, at least here in the Upper Rhine floodplains.
When it comes to calico crayfish here in the Rhine floodplains, we have to admit that ship has sailed. But we can still try to contain them here.
Broad, active measures must be taken to prevent calico crayfish from spreading, not only along the Rhine, but throughout Germany. No one knows what the consequences for the native underwater world will be otherwise. What is clear is that new crayfish are still being introduced into the ecosystem. Most come from aquariums. In the future, human behaviour will determine how much destruction crayfish will cause here along the Rhine and beyond, where biotopes are not prepared for the invasive species. After all, the American calico crayfish was never supposed to live here in the first place.